Hello, welcome back to Bee's Kitchen. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to start at the stove and I'll tell you all the ingredients that I'm going to use. I'm going to make stuffing and it's called turkey stuffing, but I actually season it with this chicken broth, but I always use it in my turkey. I think turkey's too strong. So what I have here is I have butter, which I also have onions and celery, and I'll give you the quantities at the end of the video. But I can tell you it's 1 sweet onion and probably, I think it was like 6 to 8 celery hearts. I wanted to get that in there so the butter didn't burn. Now I can tell you the rest of the ingredients. We have 1 pound of stuffing cubes, and I like the focaccia stuffing cubes because they're just more flavorful. I also have 2 big giant pieces of cornbread. I didn't make the cornbread because this is enough work, but I bought the cornbread. I used to get it at Whole Foods. They have really good cornbread. I crumbled it up. I put it in my oven and on a cookie sheet at 350 degrees, and it's a little crispy, which is good because we're going to water the, you have to put liquid in here and then let it swell as it's baking. So that's the cornbread. Then we have chicken broth. I swear by Better Than Bouillon, and this is chicken Better Than Bouillon and water, and we'll see how much we use. I have red pepper flakes, I have black pepper, and I have white pepper. I also have paprika because I want to give it just a tinge of smokiness. I have dried thyme and rosemary and sage, and I have garlic powder, celery seed, and white pepper. And that's what's gonna go into this dish. So first we're gonna saute the chopped celery and sweet onion. And I like sweet onion. That, with a little bit of the sweetness from the cornbread, really makes your dressing flavorful, and it's layers of taste. And it's finely chopped, and I don't use the Cuisinart because I like the evenness of chopping by hand. But it depends on if you have the time to do it, but you still get the flavor. So we're gonna let this start sauteing before we add any other ingredients. I can tell you a little bit about this focaccia stuffing. If you don't use focaccia and you just use white bread, and I did it for years, and then I discovered the focaccia. But the regular whole white one I use, and I've been using for many years, has always worked well for me. And you get a little difference in flavor, but it's still a great stuffing. And so let this simmer for a while. I'm going to add the bay leaves to it so they can start adding some flavor. So we'll put the bay leaves in, and then we will just let it do what it does. And I'll start adding some of the other spices in, and then I'll fine tune it. Celery seed, not celery salt. Make sure you know that. It's not celery salt, it's celery seed. Let's put let's put 2 teaspoons in. I use celery seed a lot in a lot of my recipes. When I make chili, when I make spaghetti sauce, when I make in my curries and my Indian curries, I do a lot. I put celery seed in because it really elevates the level of flavor in your dish. And I can smell it just when I added that celery seed. And you have to put it in dishes that's going to be simmering for a while. You have these little fine tiny seeds, and they're hard. But once they get hydrated, they're good. So we have that in there. And then we're just going to let this go for a few more minutes. And then we'll add this first. We'll add the bread cubes. But use cubes. I prefer to use cubes when I make this. It gives it more substance and chewiness to it when it's finally done. And I put my stuffing in the turkey. I know for years they said not to do that, but I found that I've done it as long as I can remember. My kids like the stuffing coming out of the turkey. They fight over it. They don't want the one in a dish because you always have leftovers. And I always made more turkey stuffing that was needed for the recipe, for the size of the turkey. And I usually use about 18-pound turkey, but I made enough that we had it in the turkey as well as a casserole dish of it to follow through with. Because the stuffing is like one of my favorite things. And I know there's a lot of ingredients here, but oh, is it so delicious. So I just want to get the onions sauteed and the celery sauteed somewhat so that when they're cooking in the casserole dish, because I'm going to put them in a casserole dish for you guys, but you can always, I still do the turkey, and I do my turkey, I cook my turkey overnight with stuffing. And I know they say, oh, you can't do that. You can't cook a slow turkey. You could get food poisoning. I've been doing it for not 50 years, but maybe, I'd say 40 years. And never happened. Never happened. So I cook it long enough and I get the internal temperature where it needs to be, but it's so good. So we're going to let this just simmer probably for about 10 minutes. So it becomes very flavorful. And I love butter. And you need a lot of butter. I use 3 sticks of butter in this recipe with the quantities that I've given you. And it's not too much, I promise you. And then we'll add let's see how the onion is. I didn't get that one. It's softening up. We're almost there. But when I tell you this is a dressing to die for, it's so good. And I'm watching carbs, so you know it's hard for me to eat stuffing, but I bet I taste it. I may not eat it, but I'll taste it. And then, you know, there's always those few days on holidays that you then do it. But I've made this turkey stuffing all of my life. I lived in South Africa for a while, 5 years, Johannesburg, or Joburg as they call it. And my turkey stuffing, because they don't celebrate Thanksgiving, that's an American holiday, but they loved it. I had a Thanksgiving over there and invited all my South African friends, and they absolutely loved it. So now we're going to add the bread. And what we're doing now is getting the bread moist. Now this is going to start the moistening process, but then we're going to add the broth, and that's going to continue it. And now we're going to start adding this to it. We want to get the bread moist so that we can then start adding the spices. So let's use the ladle. We'll put some in. Hear it? And then mix. And the heat helps it get to where it needs to be. And I put this in before the cornbread because the croutons are very, very dry, but delicious. But I am known for my stuffing, and I'm telling you, if you want it, I know it's a lot more. I try to stick with short recipes because people just don't have the time to cook anymore. But if you have the time, this is worth its weight in gold. It's getting moist. And now we're going to add the cornbread. And now we truly are making cornbread stuffing. I guess I should have said that. I just said, but I always made cornbread stuffing. You can see it coming together. I have the stove down to a medium low. That way we don't want to scorch. We don't want to scorch it to the bottom of the pan. Now we can start adding spices, and then we'll add some more of the, I always use red pepper flakes, and I'm just going to put a little in there, and you do that according to your taste. Black pepper. Let's add some garlic powder. I always add garlic powder. And I'd say probably, let's do this, teaspoon. That's good. Now let's make it a little bit more. Okay. Stir that up. If it starts to feel dry, just add a little bit more of your chicken broth. It's starting to look good. Let's add a little bit more, because we did add the cornbread. Let's add a little dried thyme, teaspoon. Let's add a little onion powder, teaspoon. A little white pepper, half a teaspoon. Still haven't added the sage and the rosemary quite yet, but we'll get to it. Excuse me, the spices caused me to sneeze. Probably that white pepper. But look how it's coming together. Okay, let's add a teaspoon of sage and a teaspoon of rosemary. And this is finely ground. I find that when you use the rosemary, it never breaks down. But with the powder, the ground, it gets all through it and it breaks down. You know, rosemary is it's like real barky. I guess that's a good word for it. It's nice for garnish, but when you're putting it in a recipe, I find it works better to use the ground. And that's 1 teaspoon of ground sage, 1 teaspoon of ground rosemary. And I think sage rosemary is not, it just gives it another level of flavor, but the sage is so important in a stuffing. We're getting there. Let's add a little bit more water. And some of this liquid we're going to pour over it when we bake it, because I'm just for instruction purposes, I'm not going to put it in a turkey. I'm just going to give you the dressing, and we're going to put it in a baking dish, and I'll show it to you so that you can see what it looks like after it's done. It's beautiful though. It's coming. It's soon time to taste. I didn't use salt because we used the chicken bouillon, and I find that that's salty. I use better than bouillon for just about everything. It just gives it another layer of flavor. But it's looking good. Let's taste. Delicious. The reason why I want to give you the recipes, the recipe in its completion, is because I don't cook using measuring cups and what have you. I cook by the eye. I've been cooking for so long. And so I can cook by the eye, but you know I have to alter the taste because as I'm tasting this now, I think it needs more butter. So I'm going to put some more butter in it. Let's make some space for a stick of butter. There we go. We're almost there. The bread's not filling as hard. Some of the big pieces are a little bit, but when they bake in the oven, that'll all go. They'll all soften up, as dressing is supposed to be. I'll add a little bit more pepper, black pepper that is, because it's hearty enough for black pepper. Now we have a really good stuffing. Okay, I'm about to cover it up to put it into the oven, and this is a very important part of this, is that you have to make sure that it is that it's completely sealed, so the liquid doesn't evaporate, and you have dry stuffing. So I took 2 sheets of foil and then I made seams. I'll make another one. And you just cross them over. And you can do this for anything that you're baking that you want to keep airtight. Okay, now I'm going to place this foil on top of our stuffing. Crease it around. And now we have an airtight stuffing in the baking sheet. We'll put it in the oven at 350, and we will bake it for 35 to 40 minutes. Timer went off. It's been 35 minutes. And I'm now going to take my lovely airtight cover off, and then I'm going to put it back in for another 10 minutes, just to give it a little brown on top. Here we go. Let's put it back in. Set the timer for 10 minutes. And I find that I always burn less food if I always use a timer. Okay, the timer went off. Let's pull this out of the oven. And here we go. Our wonderful stuffing. Turkey stuffing, chicken stuffing, poultry stuffing, whatever you'd like to call it. I hope you enjoy. Thank you for joining us.